r/ask Reddit. Serious, what are some places on Earth that are still unexplored because locals fear them, and what are they afraid of? I lived in the northern part of the Republic of Congo in a town called Mfondo. It was extremely remote, only accessible by boat or plane. There were many villages surrounding our city that were even more remote and only accessible by dugout canoe. One of these places was Lake Tele. The locals would talk about an animal or monster called Mokelmbembe in Lingala, the tribal language. It meant one who stops the flow of water. They basically thought it was a huge dinosaur that lived in the water there. They would describe it like we would a brontosaurus. They were terrified of where it lived because there were old legends that it would kill people with its eyes, and if anyone ate its meat it would kill the whole village. It was hard to explore that part of the country because people tended to avoid it. I've been fascinated by the Congo for a long time and really want to go. I tried to visit the Virungas 2 years ago but the visa didn't work out. I'd love to know more about your time there as I very much want to visit Lake Tele. I love rainforests. All throughout the world, wherever there are glaciers, there are crevasses, massive ones nobody ever even knows exists because they're under snow, ones that look like a small hole but open up into massive chasms you could never climb out of, etc. The fear, obviously, is never coming back out. An example of a really scary place full of them is near the base of Everest from the south side, the Khumbu Icefall. It's the start of a massive glacier, and it moves fast enough that it's constantly changing. People actually do climb over the top of it as part of the primary route to climb Everest, but actually going down into the crevasses is something you absolutely avoid. And even if you did go down and explore one day, a few hours later everything could be very, very different. This is a local one to me. In Kent, UK, there are tunnels which supposedly run underneath the county town of Maidstone. People have found entrances and gone in, but they're usually too long, dark and flooded. Nobody knows quite why they're there. Rumors say they connect places that were important when they were built, including an old asylum that was demolished in recent years, where if I recall correctly there was found an entrance to some tunnels. Additionally, there's an air raid shelter in the Maidstone Grammar School that hasn't been entered for many decades. The entrance is very thoroughly gated off, and old students say it was an entire underground school with multiple rooms, designed classrooms so that even in the event of an air raid, students could continue learning. There's even stories that behind the boards were secret rooms where the kids could hide if the Nazis sent a ground force into England. Kent is on the southern coast and near to London, so it'd be where the Nazis would logically land from France. Even if that doesn't make much sense, the shelter is off limits now, and me and my friends spent all our years there trying to get in, but the school didn't want to accept responsibility for any kids getting hurt down there. Not really unexplored, but in Japan there are many keyhole-shaped burial mounds. Many date back to the 3rd century, but with few exceptions the government won't allow excavation. The catacombs under Paris. There are about 150 miles of maze-like tunnels under the city. Only a small portion gets treated by the public. People have ventured deep into them and would go missing for days. Oh, I remember a r/WTF thread ages ago where someone took photos of a trip they made in the catacombs. It was super creepy, and I'm certain they said that they encountered some subterranean people within. Then there was something about catacomb parties or raves. It's not unexplored per se, but the Plutonium at Hierapolis emits toxic gas intense enough to kill most living things in moments, and was assumed to be a gate to the underworld, in a rather illuminating display of their culture. Rather than avoiding the cave of painfully slow asphyxiation, the Romans turned it into a tourist attraction at which one could purchase a live animal to throw in or meet oracles of Pluto who had been through into the cave and lived. Most of the world's blue holes are unexplored because they are ducking dangerous. They are deep underwater sinkholes, hundreds of feet deep. One is over 900 feet deep that generally have a toxic layer acid part of the way down. That video of the diver, his name was Yuri I think, dying, haunts me every time. There's a huge sinkhole behind my old house in Kentucky. Kentucky is absolutely full of caves. Anyways, it has a river flowing at the bottom and through a tunnel. So there's 2 cave entrances that nobody in my neighborhood had the balls to go into. My mom's friend visited one day, and she's a geologist, so she's huge into caves and wanted to see. I brought Get there to take a look. She basically glanced at it and was like, duck no, we'll die if we go in there. The current is very strong, and the rocks surrounding it looked very eroded to her. She said it's at high risk of collapsing, and the current would sweep us underground either way. I wish she had brought more of her tools and stuff. Supposedly she could have put in like a sonar buoy to see how far it goes. Recently, an ancient city was discovered in the vicinity in the forest area in Rio Platano, Honduras. Recently, because the cartels have such a big ducking hold over it, that it's simply impossible to go in there without dying or worse. So much history that could await along that river. Not found because of drug lords. La Ciudad Blanca, I believe it was called. Perhaps my favorite and that is closest to me is the former nuclear jet testing labs in the Dawsonville forest in Georgia. They are abandoned now. Some people have explored there, but back in the 50s, there was naked nuclear testing. No protection barrier, which means there is concern for higher levels of residual radiation. That said, the bunkers still exist, rumored to be complete with furniture and other things untouched since it was abandoned. atlasobscura.com link. There's an area in Tibet called the Tsangpo Gorge that allegedly has a massive hidden waterfall that only appears to people who have reached nirvana. Last I checked, the Chinese don't allow people to explore the area much, but that may have changed by now. There's a book about it written by a guy named Ian Baker who did 2 expeditions into the gorge. The Nahanni National Park in northwest Canada, also known as the Valley of Headless Men. There are no roads leading in and it is only accessible by boat or plane. Ancient tribes of the Nahanni Valley were afraid to settle within the region as they believed it to be an evil, haunted place inhabited by various spirits, specters, and devils. In the 18th century, Europeans began arriving to the area looking for gold. In 1908, 2 brothers Willie and Frank McLeod pushed farther into the valley looking for gold and disappeared only to turn up beheaded. More beheadings and mysterious deaths began occurring over the years. In 1945, a trapper appeared to have been flash frozen despite evidence of having a fire going and clutching a pack of matches. Many others just simply vanished, never to be found. Around 44 people had vanished under unknown mysterious circumstances by 1969. To this day there's no answer to what was responsible for the beheadings or the disappearances. The area is so forbidding and remote that very few people other than adventurous rafters ever attempt to explore it. Despite being a national park, Nahanni Valley is almost completely unexplored. Edit. Other known beheadings were a prospector named Martin Jorgensen whose cabin burned down in 1917 and his skeleton was recovered from the ashes with no sign of his skull. And in 1945, a miner from Ontario was found dead in his sleeping bag with his head missing. Edit. I tried looking more into where Martin Jorgensen is from and almost everything I found all had him listed as Swiss, with one place listing him as Norwegian, so I'll remove calling him Swiss until I find a conclusive answer. I promise I was just going off the reading I had done and wasn't just making my own assumptions. The inside of Australia's Black Mountain. En Wikipedia or Glink. Korkajika National Park. This thing is pretty much just a giant pile of boulders with massive internal caves that can't be mapped. To my understanding they can change over time as well due to collapses. People go in and never return. Makes the Death Mountain nickname more sensible. Edit. So apparently it's not called Death Mountain anywhere. Likely just a single Wikipedia edit. And yes, stuff in Australia wants to kill. I think that's a given. Houska Castle was built to cover up the opening to hell, a seemingly bottomless pit from which the demons of hell would crawl out at night to wreak havoc. Located in the Czech countryside. Before the castle was built to seal this entrance to hell, prisoners who had been condemned to death were thrown in. Scary shit, my dudes. The Inyanga Mountains in Zimbabwe. The myth is that if you climb this mountain and make nasty derogatory comments about the vegetation or rocks or anything you see there, for example, you pick a fruit and comment on how bitter it tastes, you'll disappear forever. It sounds ridiculous until you learn that several people, including tourists, have disappeared in that mountain. Extensive manhunts and helicopter searches failed to find a single person, dead or alive. Locals fear the mountain, but tourists take it as a challenge, but doesn't end up good for a lot of them. The most recent case was Padmanabhaswamy Temple in Kerala, India. There are 6 underground vaults labeled Ataf and the temple, out of which 5 have been opened. From these 5 vaults, about a ton of gold in form of jewelry, coins and utensils has been found, apart from diamond and other precious stones necklaces stretching 9 feet long. But the real mystery lies in the vault B, which is yet to be opened. There's a warning on the door written in Sanskrit that curse and calamity will befall on anyone who tries to open the door. The door is said to have been sealed with Nagabandham, or the snake seal, by a Siddha Purush, aka a very powerful sage who has realized the true potential that a human can achieve through spiritual discipline such as meditation. A Siddha Purush is like a living god, and only a Siddha Purush can open this vault again using the Garuda mantra. Any other human being who tries to open the vault will fail and feel the wrath of the 7-headed serpent that guards the vault. This 7-headed serpent is one of the primal beings of creation and servant of the creator of the universe, God Vishnu. The tomb of the Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. Although we have seen images of his famous terracotta warriors, nobody has ever entered the tomb, since he was the most tyrannical and violent leader in Chinese history, and because he was so powerful, there is a lot of superstition about his evil spirit and other crazy things about it. Not to mention, there is rumor of a lake of mercury within the tomb, so it could prove dangerous to open at all. The Chinese government is not allowing the tomb to be opened and zealously restricts people from having access to the land surrounding the tomb. Just interesting. I would really like to know what's inside, tbh. Edit. People are mentioning Mao being way more tyrannical. I know he was horrible, but I was under the impression that although Mao killed more people, that was partially due to the length of his reign versus that of Qin, and also that Qin employed a lot more brutal tactics unlike Mao's extreme communism. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, mate. It's free and that's a great price.